Senator, as Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche recently stated, the investigation of Mr. Homan was subjected to a full review by the FBI, agents, and DOJ prosecutors. They found no credible evidence of any wrongdoing.
And that was not my question. My question was, what became of the $50,000 in cash that the FBI delivered, evidently in a paper bag, to Mr. Homan?
Senator, I'd look at your facts.
Are you saying that they did not deliver $50,000 in cash to Mr. Homan?
Senator, as recently stated, the investigation of Mr. Homan was subjected to a full review
different question.
by the FBI agents,
That's a
by
different
Department of Justice prosecutors. They found no evidence of wrongdoing.
That's a different question. What became of the $50,000? Did the FBI get it back?
Mr. Whitehouse, Senator Whitehouse, you're welcome to talk to the FBI.
The report to you, can't you answer this question?
Senator Whitehouse, you're welcome to discuss this with Director Patel.
Did Homan keep the $50,000?
Hey everyone, welcome back. Dr. John Podcast. So let's get started. The White House press secretary didn't just stumble or get flustered. She abandoned the podium mid-sentence, voice cracking with rage, and physically fled the cameras while the world watched. The facade of control didn't crack, it shattered.
As Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche recently stated, the investigation of Mr.
Never
Homan
mind. I can see I'm not going to get a straight answer from you to a very simple question.
By the FBI agents and the DOJ. They found no credible evidence of wrongdoing. You know, you're very concerned about money and people taking money, and you rail against dark money.
Wait a second.
You work with dark money groups all the time, Senator Whitehouse.
Did you know whether or not in that investigation they looked at whether the $50,000 payment to Mr. Homan was declared by him on his tax returns?
Senator, I would be more concerned if I were you when you talk about corruption and money that when you pushed for legislation that would subsidize your wife's company.
The questions here are actually pretty specific. So having you respond with completely irrelevant far-right internet talking points really is not very helpful here. I'd like, Mr. Chairman, you generally like to have us be able to get answers to know, and we'll follow up with the QFR, and to the extent Patel wants to answer, that would be great as well. What happened to the $50,000? Did Homan keep it?
Revealing a level of panic inside the administration that no amount of spin can now conceal. Let me take you directly into the room. The atmosphere was already electric, charged with the kind of tension you can taste. Reporters were shuffling their notes, glancing at their phones, aware that a bombshell had just landed minutes before the briefing was scheduled to begin. The name on everyone's lips was Caroline Leavitt, the current gatekeeper of information for the administration. Usually she's a fortress of talking points.
Did the FBI get it back? If he kept it, did he put it on his tax returns? Pretty simple questions. Homan was the same guy who said there was a deal with Eric Adams. He said, if Adams doesn't come through, I'll be back. I'll be in his office, up his butt, saying, where the hell is the agreement we came to? Which brings us to the OPR investigation of prosecutorial misconduct by Emil Bovee, because he was also involved in that transaction. Yeah. What became of the OPR investigation of prosecutorial misconduct by Emil Bovee?
Yeah, Senator Whitehouse, to correct you for one moment, that would be the Honorable Judge Emil J. Bovee III to you.
Not at the time of this. He was an employee of the Department of Justice. And what became of the OPR investigation?
It's all pending litigation,
misconduct?
Senator. I can't discuss pending litigation nor personnel matters.
OPR customarily publicly says when there is an investigation, and at the end of it, they provide a summary. Why can't you say whether there's an OPR investigation and whether, if it's concluded, there's a summary?
Senator, I'm not going to discuss personnel matters.
A master of the pivot, capable of filibustering her way through a landmine field of hostile inquiries without breaking a sweat. But on this specific afternoon, the ground rules changed. Someone in the press pool decided to bypass the usual dance and go straight for the jugular. They asked about a document, not a rumor, not a conspiracy theory whispered in the dark corners of the internet, but a verifiable, leaked internal memo originating from the deepest bowels of the Department of Justice. This wasn't a vague accusation. This was a paper trail.
Even public ones.
Senator, I'm not going to discuss personnel matters.
So, Kash Patel told this committee that his grand jury testimony after immunization, after initially pleading the Fifth, was, and I quote, sealed by the Department of Justice. How and when and why was his testimony sealed, and by whom?
Senator, I'm not going to discuss any testimony, especially testimony that could be sealed with you.
No, the question is, was it or was it not sealed?
Senator, I'm not going to discuss that with you.
Well, he also said that he worked with the Department of Justice to have his transcript released publicly. How and when was his transcript released? Presumably, if he released it publicly, that's something you can discuss because it's public.
Well, Senator, I believe you discussed that with Director Patel.
And I'm asking you because he said the Department of Justice.
A paper trail that allegedly outlines a recommendation for a grand jury to review evidence of criminal obstruction by none other than the sitting president. What happened next was a masterclass in emotional combustion. Levitt's expression shifted from confident indifference to something resembling cornered prey. She tried the standard boilerplate dismissal, muttering about dignified processes and refusing to entertain fabrications. But the reporters didn't retreat. They smelled blood in the water.
Made this decision, and you run the Department of Justice.
I would refer that to Director Patel.
Even though you run the Department of Justice and he testified that the Department of Justice released his transcript publicly.
If it is released publicly, we will get you a copy, Senator, gladly.
If being a rather important word there, when your FBI director testified that that was a fact. Treasury compiles suspicious activity reports, referred to often as SARs, that DOJ receives automatically. Hundreds related to accounts of Jeffrey Epstein. How many of those Treasury SARs did you or Director Patel investigate?
Senator, I'm not sure if you're concerned because you took money, I believe, did you, from Reid Hoffman, one of Epstein's closest confidants, not only once but twice in 2018 and 2024, if that's correct. But, Senator, did you ask Merrick Garland any of this over the last 4 years when he sat before you?
They pressed harder, asking her point blank if she was denying the physical existence of the memo. That was the trigger. The temperature in the room spiked. According to eyewitnesses, her complexion flushed a deep crimson. Her voice escalated from a controlled monotone into a full-throated shout, condemning the fake leaks and the audacity of the media to question the integrity of the administration. And then, in a move that instantly burned itself into the history of political communications,
This investigation has been going on. This investigation was closed. Did you ask Alex Acosta that?
And Patel came to office, you said you would look into this. There were hundreds of suspicious activity reports. Some people would deduce from the fact that they are called suspicious activity reports that there might be suspicious activity. And yet you seem to have looked at zero of those suspicious activity reports involving Jeffrey Epstein accounts. Let me ask you something else. There's been public reporting that Jeffrey Epstein showed people photos of President Trump with half-naked young women. Do you know if the FBI found those photographs in their search of Jeffrey Epstein's safe or premises or otherwise? Have you seen any such thing?
You know, Senator Whitehouse, you sit here and make salacious remarks, once again trying to slander President Trump, left and right when you're the one who was taking money from one of Epstein's closest confidants, I believe, I could be wrong, correct me, Reid Hoffman.
She didn't wait for the next question. She didn't pass the baton to a deputy. She grabbed her binder, spun on her heel, and marched straight off the soundstage, leaving a room full of stunned journalists with their hands still frozen in the air. The camera lingered on an empty podium. The silence was deafening, broken only by the frantic clicking of keyboards as the digital world exploded. This is what we now call the Levitt meltdown, and it's trending globally for a reason that transcends mere political gossip. Human psychology teaches us that public figures are trained to endure.
Who was with Jeffrey Epstein on multiple occasions. And the senator sitting right next to you tried to block the flight logs from being released. Yet you're grilling me on President Trump and some photograph with Epstein? Come on.
The question is, did the FBI find those photographs that have been discussed publicly by a witness who claimed Jeffrey Epstein showed them to him? You don't know anything about that. Okay. Here's what well, no, we cut to something else. The Marshal Service is supposed to protect our federal judges. I have asked repeatedly for the Marshal Service to let me know if they are investigating or being inhibited from investigating whether or not there is orchestration.
They bob, they weave, they lie through their teeth with a smile. They do not, under any circumstances, rage quit on live television unless the cognitive dissonance of their position has become physically unbearable. Storming out is an admission of defeat. It's a nonverbal scream that says, I cannot craft a reality where this isn't true. By walking out, Levitt inadvertently validated every single word of that leaked document.
Of threats against federal judges, whether under either conspiracy laws or racketeering enterprise laws or aiding and abetting laws, whatever. But as you know, there's the person who says the threat, and then there may very well be somebody orchestrating the threat behind them. Is the Marshal Service allowed to investigate orchestration of threats, and do you know if they've taken one step to do so?
May I answer the question, Chairman Grassley? The time has expired.
I think it's the convention of the committee that if I've started my question in my time, you may answer the question.
I was asking the chairman.
Okay, before I go to Cornyn.
She wants to answer the question, Chairman.
Oh, please go ahead. I thought you said you didn't want to answer it.
Yes,
I'm sorry.
sir. Thank you. Senator Whitehouse, I would be happy to sit down with you regarding any threat to any federal judge in this country. We take threats very seriously. I will set a meeting with you, with Director Serralta of the U.S. Marshals, and I will be there. And we will talk about any threats on federal judges,
including orchestration,
who threatened them or who orchestrated them.
Bingo. Thank you.
If the memo was truly a hoax, a complete fabrication conjured by the fake news machine, the easiest thing in the world would have been to laugh it off. She could have held up a blank piece of paper and mocked the reporters, but she couldn't. Because it's real, and because it's real, staying at that podium required defending the indefensible, so she chose flight. Why does this specific leak burn so hot? Because the provenance of the document is impeccable. We aren't talking about opposition research from a political rival. We are talking about a memo reportedly generated by career prosecutors inside the Justice Department. These are the lifers, the non-political fixtures who keep the lights on regardless of which party holds the White House. These are individuals who have dedicated decades to the grind of building cases, evaluating evidence, and upholding the blind scales of justice. According to the investigation kicked off by major outlets like the New York Times and corroborated by Politico, these aren't partisan hacks. They are stone-cold professionals who looked at a mountain of evidence involving obstruction, the mishandling of highly classified materials, and a web of suspicious financial disclosures. Their conclusion wasn't a suggestion for a press release. It was a legal roadmap. They recommended that an independent entity, a special counsel, a grand jury, something beyond the reach of political appointees, take a hard look at the evidence and bring charges against the president. This is not a political ad. This is a legal triage document written by the very people tasked with keeping the executive branch honest. And when they tried to do their jobs, the house of cards started to tremble. Let's zoom out to the broader landscape of chaos, because this walkout didn't occur in a vacuum. There is a rhythmic, almost cinematic tempo to the unraveling happening right now at the top echelons of power. To understand the sheer gravity of Levitt's emotional collapse, you have to connect it to the other official who has been caught physically fleeing from accountability, Attorney General Pam Bondi. Just a handful of days before Levitt's theatrical exit, Bondi was sitting in the hot seat of a congressional hearing. The topic was money. Not theoretical budget allocations or policy funding, but cold, hard, untraceable cash. Specifically, a stack of $50,000 in FBI sting money that is seemingly evaporated into thin air. This isn't an accounting error. This cash was the centerpiece of a bribery probe targeting Tom Homan, the administration's high-profile border czar. The FBI, before the current regime took the reins, was running a classic undercover operation. They stuffed the cash in a takeout bag, ran the sting, and caught the transaction on video. It was a pristine, textbook sting operation. But now, the public integrity section that ran it has been dismantled. The case is dead. And the money, the $50,000 of taxpayer-funded bait, it's gone. Poof. Unaccounted for. When Senator Sheldon Whitehouse cornered Bondi on this very specific point, asking not about legal theories, but about the physical location of the currency, the Attorney General didn't have a spreadsheet. She didn't have a receipt. She had anger. She deflected, insisting the investigation was a dead end, a closed matter, a nothing burger. But the senator kept hammering the anomaly. Where is the money? Bondi's response was to shut down, to put up a wall of partisan grievance, accusing the committee of spreading misinformation. And then she did exactly what Levitt would do days later. During a recess, faced with the relentless pressure of a question she couldn't answer without incriminating someone, she stormed out. The nation's top law enforcement officer, the personification of American justice, refused to answer a question about missing FBI cash and literally left the building. Do you see the pattern forming here? It's not a bug in their software. It's a defining feature of their operating protocol. When the heat rises, they don't stand and fight. They run, they hide, because the truth lurking behind that curtain is too volatile to expose. This brings us to the ticking time bomb that connects these two seemingly separate threads. The missing cash and the leaked indictment memo are not isolated incidents. They are two sides of the same corrupted coin. The coin is the systematic weaponization and decay of the Department of Justice under Bondi's watch. Let's dig deeper into the leaked memo because the contents are genuinely terrifying for the West Wing. The document paints a picture of a massive cover-up. It details evidence related to the obstruction of justice by a sitting president. It lays out a chain of custody for classified documents that were allegedly treated like personal souvenirs, shown to unauthorized eyes and hidden from federal retrieval efforts. It catalogs the financial anomalies. These career prosecutors who wrote the memo weren't just musing. They were making a formal documented declaration that there is enough smoke here to indicate a 5-alarm fire, and they demand a special independent body be appointed because they have zero faith that Pam Bondi will allow a fair investigation. And why would they? Bondi's entire tenure has been defined by the Thursday Night Massacre vibe, a strategic purge of ethical watchdogs, and the systematic dismantling of investigative units that prioritize law over loyalty. Think about the psychological warfare at play here. The White House communication team isn't just fighting a news cycle. They are fighting a documentary record. When Levitt screamed about fake leaks, she accidentally confirmed the leak was authentic. If I supply you with a document and you shout, "I despise the fact that you have this document," you are not denying the document exists. You are expressing fury that your secrecy failed. The memo is real. The evidence exists. And the White House is in panic mode because they can't control the physical evidence sitting in the DOJ archives. You can't spin paper. You can't bully a hard drive. In the past, the playbook was simple. Discredit the media, rally the base, wait for the news cycle to turn. But that strategy fails when prosecutors from the inside start keeping receipts. The walls aren't just closing in. They are being documented, measured, and reported by the people inside the fortress. This is why Levitt fled. She was standing in front of the world, holding a shield made of talking points, while the reporters were firing armor-piercing rounds made of her own colleagues' legal assessments. Now let's shine a light on the supporting cast of this political horror story, specifically the sudden legal jeopardy of John Bolton. The timing of Bolton's indictment is so narratively perfect it feels scripted. Just a day after Levitt's briefing room implosion, the gavel drops on Bolton for mishandling classified materials. If you've been tracking the vendetta dynamics here, your radar should be screaming. Bolton, the former national security advisor, is no Trump ally. He's a defector. He wrote a scathing tell-all. He painted the president as a transactional loose cannon. He crossed the family. And now the full weight of the Justice Department, the same DOJ that rapidly shut down the case against Tom Homan and buried the evidence against the president, is aggressively going after an enemy of the president for the exact kind of misconduct the president himself is accused of. This is what selective prosecution looks like in the raw. You cannot legitimately argue that classified document violations demand prison time for Bolton while simultaneously sweeping the Mar-a-Lago boxes under the rug. It's philosophically and legally incoherent. Unless, of course, the law isn't being applied. Unless the DOJ is no longer a neutral arbiter of fact, but a sword of retribution for the powerful and a shield for the king. This is the ethical crossroads that forced those career prosecutors to write the memo in the first place. They saw the Bolton indictment being prepped as a weapon of personal destruction while the Trump document case gathered dust in a kill room. They saw the bribery probe into Homan being terminated with extreme prejudice, the agents reassigned, and the evidence locked away. And then, crucially, they saw the physical money vanish, and nobody seemed willing to look for it. What happened to the $50,000? Did Homan keep it? Did it go back into a slush fund? Was it just lost? In any normal administration, if 50 grand in FBI cash disappeared into the hands of a subject of a bribery investigation, it would be the lead story for a year. It would spawn task forces. Bondi's refusal to answer the question is perhaps the most blatant signal of corruption we've seen. She was asked a yes or no, accounting-style question. Where is the money? She gave an emotional speech instead of an answer. That's because she knows where the money is. Or she knows that the answer destroys the illusion of a legitimate investigation. She panicked, just like Levitt panicked. The entire upper echelon is suffocating under the weight of the secrets they are carrying, and their lungs are starting to fail in public. Let's sit with the spectacle of the briefing room again, because it's a visual metaphor that won't age out of the history books anytime soon. A press secretary's job is to be a heat shield. They are supposed to stand there and absorb white-hot plasma. By walking out, Levitt effectively left the president fully exposed to the radiation of a prosecutor's evidence binder. The sheer recklessness of the walkout tells us the administration has no containment strategy. They have fake news, and they have witch hunt. But they do not have a point-by-point rebuttal of the facts laid out by their own DOJ staff. Why? Because you can't rebut facts. You can only bury them. And the burial sites are starting to flood, sending the rotting evidence back to the surface. The memo is just the first piece of debris to surface. Think about the escalating timeline. First, you have the quiet resistance of the career staff. Then, the mass resignations of those who couldn't stomach the corruption. Then, the careful drafting of internal protection memos. Then, the leak. Then, the brutal high-definition exposure of the administration's panic via a viral breakdown. This is a cascade failure. Let's explore the human element of the missing money fiasco, because it's so flagrant, it borders on absurdist theater. Imagine you are an FBI agent. You spend months, maybe years, building a solid public integrity case. You get the wiretaps approved. You rig the sting. You watch through a surveillance van camera as a future cabinet official accepts a greasy bag full of government cash. You tag the bills, you log the evidence, you feel the thrill of a righteous bust. Then the administration changes politically. Suddenly, your section is restructured. Your superiors are ousted. The case file is recalled. You are told the investigation is no longer active. And then, like a punchline to a very dark joke, you hear that even the physical buy money has vanished. Not returned to the evidence locker. Not seized in a forfeiture. Just gone. That's not incompetence. That's complicity. Bondi standing before Congress, refusing to access the accounting records of her own FBI, isn't dodging. She's obstructing the view of the smoking gun. And when Senator Whitehouse cornered her, she realized that the standard congressional immunity to testimony was being strained to a breaking point. She had to physically leave the chamber to stop herself from either perjuring herself or spilling the beans. And the beans are starting to spill regardless. That's the beauty and the terror of a whistleblower leak. The October 12th memo, drafted by the resigned prosecutors, is a life raft for the rule of law. These prosecutors didn't just quit in a huff. They documented the why of their exit. They compiled a metadata-rich index of the alleged crimes. They stated in no uncertain terms that if a special counsel isn't appointed to review the obstruction described in their files, it's because Pam Bondi is blocking it. It's a preemptive exfiltration of truth. If the White House thought they could decapitate the special counsel investigations by simply firing everyone and shutting down the servers, they forgot that lawyers take notes. Lawyers keep drafts. Lawyers know where the skeletons are buried because they dug the graves. The Levitt meltdown wasn't a reaction to a single sheet of paper. It was a reaction to the terrifying realization that the DOJ might be leaking from the inside at a mass scale. There are reportedly over 200 staffers who have been purged, sidelined, or ejected from the building. That's 200 potential sources. 200 people with access to highly sensitive investigations that were shut down for political convenience. The math is terrifying for the administration. They cannot possibly stop all those leaks. This brings us to the structural crisis. We are witnessing the collapse of the independent Justice Department in real time. The connective tissue between the Homan bribery probe, the Trump classified documents, and the Bolton indictment is the theme of selective impunity. If you are the president or you serve his immediate political desires on the border, the DOJ will literally lose the evidence to protect you. They will disgrace their own agents by misplacing bribe money to stop a successful prosecution. If you are John Bolton, a man the president despises, you will be indicted for the same class of activity that the president brags about. This is banana republic stuff. This is third world autocracy. The administration has been given the keys to the law enforcement machinery, and they are driving it like a bumper car, crashing into enemies and throwing their bodies under the wheels while ferrying their friends safely to a life of impunity. However, the internal pressure of keeping the gears of this machinery on the tracks is blowing the engine. People like Levitt and Bondi are the exhaust pipes, and we are just watching the black smoke billow out as they scream and flee. Let's talk about the vibe of the moment. For those of us who study political implosions, the scent in the air is familiar. It smells like Watergate's Saturday Night Massacre, where officials chose to resign rather than obstruct. It smells like the final paranoid days of any White House where the walls have started talking. When press secretaries rage quit, it signals a loss of narrative control so total that they can't even spin a fake story to buy time. They have no acceptable lies left. Think about the blunder. If Levitt had just stood there, sweating, stuttering, and repeating, "I refer you to the Department of Justice," the video would have faded. It would be a boring exchange. But because she cracked, the clip went viral globally. She inadvertently directed the internet's attention directly to the classified documents and the obstruction evidence. She lit a spotlight on the very thing she wanted to hide. This is the concept of the Streisand effect on steroids. By refusing to engage and fleeing the scene, she created the most compelling visual hook possible. What was she so afraid of? What's in the memo? And now, everyone is digging. Looking ahead, the trajectory is unnerving. The leaked memo is out there, sitting in reporters' inboxes. But that's just the trailer. The full movie, the complete package of evidence compiled by the career prosecutors, is likely still sitting on a secure server under Bondi's lock and key. But for how long? We are in a holding pattern waiting for the next shoe to drop. A shoe that might come in the form of a complete evidence dump. A congressional committee with subpoena power is a wild card. If the midterms shift the balance of power, the gavel will swing hard. They won't ask Bondi nicely where the money is. They will rip through the FBI's asset forfeiture logs and find the paper trail. They will haul in the retired agents who handled the Homan sting and show them the video. They will depose the authors of the whistleblower memo and ask them, under oath, what crimes they believe were obstructed. And Bondi and Levitt won't be able to walk out of a subpoena. A refusal to testify or comply with a congressional subpoena in a hostile chamber isn't a PR blunder. It's a constitutional crisis that leads to inherent contempt and the sergeant at arms. Underneath all of this drama is a very dark, cynical realization about how this machine operates. The administration is structured on a principle of total loyalty, not total legality. The disappearance of the $50,000 isn't just a quirky anecdote, it's the cost of doing business. The cover-up of the classified documents isn't just a legal defense, it's a necessity to keep the president out of an orange jumpsuit. The indictment of John Bolton isn't just a coincidence, it's a message to every other potential whistleblower. If you cross us, we will find a crime, whether it's a process error or a genuine breach, and we will bury you. This is the machine that the career prosecutors tried to stop. They saw the memo not as a disloyal leak, but as a life-saving injection of truth into a dying system. They are calling on the silent majority within the legal community to wake up before precedent is set in stone that the Attorney General is merely the president's private defense lawyer. So, what is the ultimate connective puzzle here? The panic. That's the key word in the title, and it's the key word in reality. Pam Bondi panicking before Congress because she's asked to trace missing drug money. Caroline Leavitt panicking at the podium because she's asked to confirm a damning piece of evidence. These are not strong, confident leaders executing a master plan. These are people holding back a dam with their bare hands, and we just watched the water burst through the cracks. They are running from rooms because they cannot sit there and maintain the lie anymore. The psychology of a cover-up is that it eventually collapses under its own weight. You have to tell a lie to cover a lie to cover a lie until the sheer architecture of the falsehood is so complex that one honest question brings the whole thing crashing down. Where is the money? Is the memo real? These are simple binary questions. The inability to answer them with simple binary answers is the confession. We are living in an era where the absurd becomes normal if we aren't careful. Don't let the cacophony of other news drown out the significance of a press secretary storming off camera. Don't let the normalization of scandal distract from $50,000 of your money vanishing into the pocket of a political appointee without a trace. And don't let the spin doctors convince you that the prosecution of John Bolton on document charges exists in a universe separate from the president's infinitely more severe document scandal. They are two fingers on the same dirty hand. The mass resignations at the DOJ were the canary in the coal mine. The canary is long dead, and the miners are now running for the exits too. The difference is, we are watching the mine collapse from the outside through a live television feed. We are watching the dust cloud pour out of the entrance as the engineers inside, Leavitt and Bondi, scream fake dust while running away. The truth has a way of getting out. It always does. And right now, that truth is leaking, panicked, raged against, and running. But it's undeniably out in the open. The story is only beginning. And based on the way the officials are acting, the real explosion hasn't even hit yet. Stay sharp. Keep watching the empty podium and follow the money.